The eMLB 2026 season is about halfway through, and there are storylines aplenty as we enter the month of June. We are about to hit the All-Star break. We're about to hit the eMLB draft. Trade deadlines coming up at the end of the month. July is a great time for eMLB baseball, and we are here to talk about June and how that went and what we can expect to see in July. And joining me, as always, on the eMLB Insider Podcast is the Cincinnati Reds GM, JR. How are you doing today?
Very good, Anju. Good to be back with you here in the eMLB Insider Studio, and can't wait to catch up on the recent action.
Absolutely. So, why don't we do a quick uh, recap of where we currently are in the standings as I bring it up here? So, actually, let me go to the main page because I like having the little extra stats on the outside. Where do I go for that? Or maybe I just had a button. Oh no, not the league news. It's going to freeze it. No. Standings. Oh, there it is. Show leaderboards. I had a button unpressed. All right. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. Starting off in the American League East, the Baltimore Orioles have regained control of the division, now 4 games up on the Boston Red Sox. Yankees are holding steady at 500, definitely improving their record over last year. Tampa Bay Rays, a little bit of a disappointing performance so far this season, 7.5 back, and then the Blue Jays at 10 back. The Minnesota Twins, one of the surprises of the season, is there at the top of the American League Central with the Cleveland Indians 2 games behind. White Sox, Royals 6 and 7 back. And then on the flip side, probably one of the biggest disappointments of the season, the Detroit Tigers are holding up the rear in the AL Central. And speaking of the Twins, this is a special episode where we will actually get to interview the GM of the Minnesota Twins later on in the episode. So stick around for that as we get a little bit of insight into how the Twins have been successful so far this season. And then the juggernaut that is the American League West has the 2 best records in baseball with the Houston Astros and LA Angels, the only teams in eMLB that crack the 50-win total, 2 games apart from each other. Mariners have unfortunately fallen off the pace, and they are looking to it's going to be hard for them to get back into it. They are now 10 games back, even with a 43-37 record. And then the Rangers, another one of the teams that may be performing below expectations. And then the Oakland Athletics, who we kind of expected to struggle as they are in the middle of a rebuild. They're 31.5 games back. It's going to be rough when you have the best record in baseball and the worst record in baseball in the same division.
Yeah.
So that's a scary number. Moving over to the National League, we still have the Phillies holding on to a 3-game lead over the Nationals with the Braves, Marlins, and Mets 11, 12.5, and 14 games back. NL Central, the Cubs are still holding on to their sizable lead over the Cardinals and Brewers, both 6 games back. The Reds are hovering around 500 with 10.5 back. And the Pirates, again, another one of those underperforming teams, based on expectations at 13.5 back. And then the San Francisco Giants are leading the National League West, 1 game over San Diego, 7 over LA Dodgers, 10 over Arizona, and 21.5 over Colorado. If you look at the wild card standings based on these, we have on the American League side, the Angels are 8 up on the Indians, who are tied for second place with the Seattle Mariners. Red Sox and Yankees are both within striking distance at 2.5 and 3 games back. On the NL side, the Padres are in the first spot of the wild card with the Cardinals and Brewers tied for the second spot. Dodgers and Nationals 2 and 2.5 games back. Whew. Okay, all that to say, JR, where are your surprises as we are now we're pretty much halfway through the season at this point?
Yeah, halfway through there, nobody is a fluke at this point. If you're in a good spot, it's because your team is playing well. Early on, obviously, any 5, 6, 7 game stretch can play a big role, but halfway through the season, you start to see teams establish what they are, and you mentioned the Twins and GT at that team. They still continue to look strong. They went through a little bit of a tough stretch here lately, but have still maintained that lead. So they've been great to see. We'll obviously touch on that a little bit more later once we have him here. But man, that AL West just continues to me. I was really hoping that Seattle would still continue to keep up, and you essentially for a while there had the 3 best teams in baseball. in the entire league, all in one division there. And I guess it was only a matter of time before one team, fell off a little bit. And you all,
Yeah, and
go ahead.
actually, it was the Minnesota Twins who we were talking about that actually was the big dagger for the Mariners as they faced each other 7 times in the month of June. Minnesota won 6 out of the 7, which really put the Seattle Mariners on a slide heading into July. And now it's funny, they have a 43-37 record, which is still really good, but they're 10 games back of the leader in Houston. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, and by the similar token in the NL West, the San Francisco Giants with Ethan Candela and Jandy Ronson at the top of their rotation. I mean, to have two stud starting pitchers like that at the head of your rotation, that's really kind of like a playoff built for a playoff team there to make a run. But here in the regular season, they're really leading the charge there and just piling up wins. And now that they're getting some better pitching out of Brad Keller behind them, Jeremy Hoxie's pitching well. I mean, that rotation is just going to pile up a whole lot of victories, even if the offense still kind of stays where it's at, where it's just kind of lower end of the National League, just because that pitching is so superior.
Absolutely. But don't look now. The Padres are just 1 game back of them, and they have been playing well on both sides of the ball. They have a really good offense and a really good pitching staff. And if the Giants are going to hold them off, they're probably going to need their offense to at least improve a little bit to make sure that they can stave off the Padres. On the flip side, though, a couple of the disappointing teams, I think the New York Mets stand out to me. They were in contention for a playoff spot up until the very end of last season, trying to nab one of those wild card spots and maybe even nab a division lead, as the NL East was kind of on the low side of wins with the Nationals winning that division. But they are 29-49, 14 games back of the Philadelphia Phillies, and you have to wonder. Denbrew, the GM over there, has made a couple trades already. You wonder if this might be a time for a complete rebuild.
It's always tough to determine, what you should do in a situation like that. The Mets definitely have some solid pieces. I mean, that's why they were able to, do what they did last year. But you got to figure this season is a lost cause at this point. I mean, 14 games back, even in a division like that doesn't have a powerhouse team, kind of tells you like, hey, this season isn't going to be what it's all about. So going to be determining there what pieces may be worth moving. I mean, the one thing is with a team like the Mets and the market they're in, they definitely don't have to move anybody to move salary. So they're still going to be able in the offseason to go out and potentially address some areas of need with some real quick fixes. If there's some people on the free agent market or talent in the trade market who some other teams need to move to make their budgets work. So Denver's definitely going to have opportunities there to improve, but I think you'll see him continue to make some moves to sell off parts for this year as we get closer to the trade deadline. But that NL East, if you take a look at that division.
Someone's got to take control at some point, right?
It reminds me so much of last season. I mean, if you remember that we were waiting for a team to do something. The Nationals really all season were kind of stuck in neutral, and then they just got into the postseason and just were unbeatable. They went and made the run for the World Series title. So, you sit there and you think like, all right, when's Washington going to step up and take over with their talent? But then you look back to last year and they never did that in the regular season, and it still worked out fine. So,
yeah. Now, talking about teams that are potentially moving pieces, recently Colorado put out an interesting name, and apparently there are rumors that left fielder offensive stud Seiya Suzuki is now being talked about in trade conversations, as we are in the month of July, which is where trade talks really start ramping up. Who's buyers, who's sellers? Do you think the Rockies are serious about moving Suzuki, who is now past the really high inflated beginning of his contract, which was at the time $80 million at the beginning? It's now a more reasonable 30-ish million for over the next few seasons. Do you think the Rockies are going to have some serious inquiries, and do you think he gets moved by the end of this trade deadline?
That's a really good question. I mean, we we have a set of GMs who I feel like are very money conscious, even the GMs that have money to spend. So I think there's definitely the mindset of there's a hesitation in a lot of cases to go out and acquire a player with a contract of say a Suzuki's, because again he has an opt out after this year, but there's no way he's going to opt out of that contract with what's remaining. Um, so you have to figure that is definitely not going to happen. So you're trading for a guy that you're going to be committed to for a while, and again he's a really good bat. He's a really good player to have, but that is a big chunk of money there. Now, we were just talking about the Mets, right? So the Mets are a team who definitely needs offensive help, and this is the kind of move. I'm just totally spitballing something like this here, that they could afford to bring in the contract of Seiya Suzuki and take that whole contract in. They obviously could use his bat for these future seasons, not for this year, but if nobody else is willing to kind of pony up for that contract, that could be a spot where Denver is able to make a move that is really more for the next 3 seasons rather than this year.
Be interesting to see what kind of players he would have to send back, which might kind of go counterproductive to the next few seasons. If you're giving away some top prospects that might be hitting the majors soon,
Yeah,
might be counterproductive if you're bringing in Suzuki, but also selling off some of your future.
but if this is all dependent on how eager is Colorado to move him.
That's
That
true.
that is the big determining factor here. If Colorado feels like we really need this contract off the books because we want to use that money to sign Grant Levine to an extension, we want to use that money to sign Colton Welker to an extension, we want to lock somebody up, or we want to have money to get a different type of player on the free agent market, it could be worth it to them to get a you know not to say minimal return, but a just an okay return, just to kind of get a fresh start and have that contract off the books.
Be interesting to see how the trade deadline shakes out. Any team that you think are going to be really aggressive at the trade deadline to try to add pieces to either solidify their playoff position or to make a playoff push if they're behind a little bit right now?
I mean, let's be honest. We joke. Sadier is always up for a good trade.
That's true.
So he's kind of the layup. He's kind of the layup choice.
He's always making trades,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
look
he
where his
can
team
move
is
it.
right now. He's 2 games out of the playoff spot,
Yeah,
and actually he's tied for the wild card right now.
yeah, I definitely would see him making a deal. I would see Brendan making a deal. Brendan with the Orioles is always looking for a trade, but
He's already made a few.
yeah, he's already made a few. But I would say, Ben with the Astros, Tom with the Angels, those guys are always really good about not resting on what their team has in a lot of ways during the season, and identifying, what they could add to really bolster their team for that final bit of the stretch run. So it still would not surprise me to see one of them make a really big move.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I was literally going to say the same thing. I was going to say neither of those teams wants to be stuck with a wild card spot. And I think even though they have the top 2 records in baseball, they are going to want to get the advantage on the other team because they know they're going to be right with them up until the very end. And I think the fact that you can avoid playing that 1-game wild card game is a really big advantage going into the playoffs and be able to stick yourselves into that division series without having to worry about just one and done. The Angels and Rangers technically had to do that last year for the division. They had to play each other for the division. Texas was sent to the wild card game. But fortunately, they won their wild card game, right? Over the Red Sox, I think.
Yeah.
So they still were able to do so, but I bet that they would have preferred to have beaten the Angels and gotten that division title last year.
Yeah, and in the National League, for me, the one team that absolutely should be making a move is the Cubs. The Cubs, just like Boston last year, I think if the Cubs are really wanting to be World Series title contenders, they have got to address the starting pitching. There's too much good pitching there, like we just talked about with San Francisco and San Diego in the NL. They also have offenses. At least the Padres have offense to go with that. And as great as a lineup as the Cubs have, I really feel like to be a true serious contender, they're going to have to make a bold move in their starting pitching.
And kind of the flip side of that, a team in the NL I think needs to make a move is the Giants. Kind of like the opposite reason that you said is that the Giants have one of the best rotations in baseball, but they need offensive help in a bad way. Like literally the Cubs and the Giants are the opposites of each other, and they are essentially they have essentially the same record. Right? They have the same number of wins. It's just the Giants have a couple more losses. But literally, those two teams are diametrically opposed to each other right now. Like Chicago needs pitching, Giants need hitting, and it'll be interesting to see which of those two teams, or maybe even both of them, make that big splash. Maybe the Giants are in on Seiya Suzuki to trade him within the division. Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, I mean, again, if you just look at it in a vacuum, you have a team in Colorado looking to move a guy and get some parts, who would be a perfect fit with the Giants and what they need. But will Mike, the Giants GM, will he be willing to make a move that takes on that kind of salary commitment? There's just it's a tough decision to have to make.
Or even the fact that you would have to trade within the division. Although next year with the expansion and changing around divisions, you're going to have to probably trade more often in the division if once we hit that expansion, because it's more than likely. I don't see the eMLB going to 4 divisions per league, or even sticking with 3. I think the most likely scenario is going to 2. So you would have to start being more willing to trade in division, because now there's more teams in your division, less. And if you're like, I'm never going to trade in a division, you have less teams to trade with overall. So,
and to me, this is one of those cases too where you have two teams going in very different directions.
Yes.
So it's a little bit easier to make that kind of in-division trade when you feel like one team is in its window to win and the other team is, probably still a little bit of ways from that point.
Absolutely. So why don't we, as we're looking forward, now let's take a step back and look at what happened in the month of June. We have a few awards that took place. Let's see. Accomplishments. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's major awards. Minor awards. There we go. Let's go to the American League Hitter of the Month out in Boston, known for their offense, not so much for their pitching, as we already mentioned. Rafael Devers, the all-star third baseman, hit .308 with 12 home runs, 39 RBIs, and 19 runs scored. He is currently one of the powerhouses of that Boston lineup, is over a 300 average. He already has 31 home runs on the season. I think that leads the majors, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, that does lead the majors. He's the only player with at least 30 home runs right now. And definitely leading, well, I don't know if you could say leading the Boston offense, because a lot of batters are hitting well over there. One of the leaders in that Boston lineup, which is keeping them near the top of their division. Then over on the National League side, we've got Asher Kim from the San Diego Padres, hit .384 with 7 home runs, 28 RBIs, 21 runs scored for the month of June. He is currently hitting .333 on the season with 18 home runs, 59 RBIs, and 52 runs scored. He is the staple at the top of that San Diego lineup with the Kim siblings leading the way offensively over there in San Diego, and is a big part of where they are in the standings.
Yeah, Rafael Devers, I mean, it's funny when you take a look at his stats. You could make the argument, in some ways, his May was even better than his June. He actually had a higher OPS in May, although a lot of the counting stats, the RBIs, 38 RBIs in June, I believe. Just an incredible, actually 39 RBIs in June over 29 games. I mean, just an incredible run there. And he just continues to just stack those up. You know, the baby faced assassin, as his nickname says. You know, definitely well on his way to a fifth straight season with at least 100 RBIs, and you know, with 31 home runs already, he's probably going to top his 39, his career high of 39, and he might top his career high of 126 RBIs from last year. So he just continues to mash the ball there.
All right. Moving on to the pitchers. In the American League, the two-way stud Shohei Ohtani takes home the pitcher of the month, where he ended up 5-0 with a 2.47 ERA, struck out 48 across 43 and 2/3 innings, only giving up 17 hits and 13 walks. That is a very impressive June for him. Overall, 9-3 with a 3.50 ERA with over 100 strikeouts in 100 innings. And actually, this breaks the streak of Mariners pitchers winning the Player of the Month award. But it's still not out of the AL West. Still in the AL. Come on, pitchers in the other two AL divisions. You all got to step it up.
What are you doing?
And then on the National League side, we talked about it earlier. You said it specifically. You pointed out Brad Keller is stepping up behind Candela and Ronson. He is actually the National League Pitcher of the Month with a 4-0 record, 25 strikeouts, and a minuscule 1.21 ERA, which really brought down his ERA if his ERA for the year is a 4.24.
Yeah, you know, if you look back in the month of May, his ERA was over 7. So big bounce back month for Brad Keller there. And again, you know, when you have that 1-2 combo already that are essentially two aces every time out. You know, every 5 days you've got two aces running out there who are giving you essentially it feels like a 90% chance to win. You know, if you get any quality starting pitching from those, you know, third and fourth guys in particular, you know, that is just a recipe for big time success. And Brad Keller, you know, definitely stepped up there for them in June, and big reason why the Giants, you know, continue to be able to hold off the Padres there for right now.
Absolutely. And now on to the rookies of the month. And I'll be honest, I did not know who this player was when I first saw this award, but Jack Carey, pitcher out of Chicago for the White Sox, gets the rookie of the month. He pitched to a 3-0 record with a .96 ERA, struck out 23 over 28 innings, and held opponents to a 200 batting average. He is a recent call-up, I believe. He's only made a few starts on the year. Let's take a look at that even further.
Yeah,
He
only
has made
7.
7 starts so far on the year. He didn't even make a start in AAA this year. He was in all relief appearances, and then all of a sudden gets called up to start at the major league level. And he has performed well to the tune of a 2.68 ERA and a 3-1 record across those 7 starts. So that has been pretty impressive, and I'd say that GM Hedges over there has been very happy to see Carey step up in a big way and snag a Rookie of the Month award.
Yeah, you know, former 9th round pick. I mean, and a guy that, you know, he's not a CCP. He's a you know, product of the game engine who just has come up, and you know, the White Sox are always looking for some starting pitching help, and has come up and pitched really well for them. So it's a good story there.
Absolutely. And then I promise I didn't save this for the last on purpose. It's just the order. I went from bottom to top. You guys watch me do it. But the June Rookie of the Month for the National League is none other than my third baseman, or /DH /first base / wherever I need him in the lineup. Benny the Jet Rodriguez hit 374 with 8 home runs, 24 RBIs, and 13 runs scored. You could argue that he might have had better numbers than the NL Hitter of the Month in Kim, but he settles for the Rookie of the Month award, which I was honestly surprised at because I figured that Trey Griffey was just going to win this award every month by default. So I am very happy to see Benny snag this award this month.
Yeah, Benny the Jet and your own CCP, Andrew Alexander, both a couple of, you know, rookie studs who've been playing well there for your Cardinals.
Yeah, my CCP's not really hitting that well. Let's just be real.
Well, they've been, he's been a big part of things, so he's might have cooled off some, but he's still a big piece for you guys there.
I hope he picks it up because I'll be honest, he's not hitting where I expected him to be. But we're focusing on Benny right now. Benny is hitting way better than I expected him to. And if it wasn't for Trey Griffey over in your camp, he would be the front runner for Rookie of the Year. As who was it that wrote that article on front runners for the awards? That was a great article,
That
by
was
the way.
Sadier. Sadier did
Sadier.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you guys are in our Discord, if not, link in the description below. But Sadier, the GM of the Cleveland Indians, wrote a great piece on his mid-season frontrunners for the all of the major awards, and he picked out 3 people per award, and he mentioned both Kenny and Trey Griffey in his Rookie of the Year award, and I hope he keeps this up because outside of Benny, the only offense we've had has been Royce Lewis, and so he's hoping to set an example for the rest of his teammates. Acuna's picked it up recently, so hopefully that sticks. But Kenny is having a breakout rookie season for the Cardinals, and we hope that continues, especially since Anthony Rendon's contract is up at the end of the year. This might be the future third baseman of the St. Louis Cardinals for the foreseeable future. So congratulations to all of our award winners across the American League and National League, and I wonder if any of these. I wonder if a player like who was I looking at? Keller, maybe he gets on. Maybe he gets flipped for a bat. I don't know. In the trade deadline talks, I don't know. Maybe. Who knows?
Could be. Again, if you're looking at things from a postseason standpoint, you have to get in, obviously. But
Yep.
The Giants already have the combo there at the top of their rotation. Just like here, the Phillies in real life have made their way to the World Series, with their bats, but also, having those, two real strong starting pitchers at the head of their rotation. So if you can take a quality arm like Keller and address a big need on offense, that could be a game changer for them.
Absolutely. Now, up next, now that we have successfully finished and recapped the month of June, we are now going to move over to an interview with the Minnesota Twins GM, GT Sundown, and we will be right back with that interview, so stay tuned. And we are joined now with Ken, aka GT Sundown, the general manager of the Minnesota Twins, one of the feel-good stories of the 2026 eMLB season so far. How are you doing tonight, Ken? Thank you for joining us.
I'm doing great. Excited to be on here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're excited that we're getting back into these interviews. We'll be doing hopefully some more of these as we go along, especially as we come up on the eMLB draft. But first question for Ken is, your Twins are currently sitting atop the AL Central with a 2-game lead over the Indians as we go into the month of July. Is this where you expected your team to be at this point in the season?
Probably not. I mean, I thought we would be competitive. I had some optimism for the season. I don't know if I saw top of the division in July as our likely outcome, but I think it was certainly within. I mean, obviously, it was in the sort of the possible outcomes. I've been pretty happy with the way they're playing. I was really the June schedule was rough. I was really worried going into June. We had a lot of AL West teams on our schedule and the Giants, and we took care of business pretty well against them, and then kind of slacked off towards the end to get with the division matchups that kind of brought us back to the pack a little bit. But I'm definitely happy with where we're at, and a little bit pleasantly surprised to be where we currently sit.
Yeah, to your point, I'm looking at your June schedule now. You took 2 out of 3 from Houston. You split a 4-game series with the Angels. And then you had 7 games against Seattle where
Yes.
you went 6-1 against them throughout the course of June. That's impressive. But then, as you mentioned, you dropped 2 straight series to the White Sox and the Indians to end out the month. So not exactly you started to pull away, but then they kind of pulled you right back.
Lost the division games. We did win 2 out of our last 3 against Boston at least, but the Cleveland was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a murderer's row of a schedule when you take a look at it. I mean, really, other than those games against the White Sox, all of those teams essentially are contending for playoff spots here halfway through the
The White
season.
Sox
So
swept me, I think. So,
Oh, the Indians swept you.
Oh, the Indians swept me. Sorry.
Yeah. So, what do you think has contributed to the success of your team so far this year?
I mean, it's been, I kind of, I like good defense and good starting pitching. That's been sort of the key. And then I've got, at least one or two really great hitters that are kind of carrying the weight offensively. But I think it's defense and starting pitching. I had my bullpen numbers. My bullpen is actually better than I think it looks. But it's still definitely the weak part on the pitching side. But I toyed around with some using openers in the beginning, and I think that messed with my bullpen ERA a little bit. It did not work. The starters that I was throwing out as followers did not do well in that role. But yeah, I think starting pitching and defense is why we are where we are.
Yeah, just looking through your team rankings in the AL, you are first in the American League in least amount of errors. You are second in zone rating and third in defensive efficiency. So that definitely speaks to that. So that's something I definitely focused on as the GM of the Cardinals at one point. But you definitely are benefiting greatly from that. Do you think there are any specific moves that you made that put you into that position? Like, remind me again when you started as the GM of the Twins, so I can remember the timeline of that.
So I think I'm coming up right on 1 year in game. I think the draft last year is what left the Twins open. There was I don't even know the whole story, but something happened during the draft, and that ended up opening up the Twins. So I took over probably sometime in July of 2025.
So this is your first full season with us. So what was your...
Yes.
Did you have a specific game plan going into the off season, and were you able to accomplish your goals in the off season before coming in here?
So I'm not really, I don't have grand plans as much as it's just sort of, I approach the off season and look at where I can fill spots with free agents. But obviously the big move happened to be the Royce Lewis trade, as you are familiar with. I will say, and this will probably come up again later on, but I'm not an easy guy to talk trade with. I'm not opposed to trades. I don't know. I'm not out there seeking trades either. It takes someone really wanting to get a deal done to make it happen.
Which was the case with us. I was the one pestering you.
I felt like, Royce Lewis obviously is a tremendous player. He's on pace for 10 wins for you guys. But he also was in his last expensive ARB year. Minnesota does not have the budget that some other teams do. It's not, we're not at the bottom, but, Royce was asking for a pretty decent amount to extend. So I was open to making a deal, especially when we started talking and you were offering up pieces that made a lot of sense for my team, not 5 years down the road, right? Right now, I've got 3 of the 4 guys in the deal currently on my big league roster. And so I felt like as tough as it was to give up Royce, to add a good middle infield piece that's going to be on the team for a long time, as well as an upcoming starting pitcher, and then Evan White, who he's been solid, if not spectacular for me at first base, but it was a position I knew I needed to upgrade. I've kept Laron behind the plate. He's not stellar defensively behind the plate, but it seems like the new engine, it's not quite as costly to be a little worse behind the plate. And his, as a difference maker at that position, it's been nice to have him there. So yeah, I think the Royce Lewis was the big trade, and then I have to look back at my free agents. I got Victor Robles late, obviously after the season started. He has not been hitting great. He's got a 194 batting average so far, but I didn't necessarily get him for the bat either. So I like his defense out there.
Yeah. He's hitting 194, but he still has a positive WAR. So you have to think that defense is making a difference.
I think he's a bit of a streaky hitter. He had a really slow start when he first came onto the squad. Then he heated up for a little bit, and he's cooled off of late.
I think back to the Lewis trade. I think for one of the things that came out after that trade was made is I know there were a few GMs who felt like, man, if Ken would have probably shopped him around, maybe he could have gotten a better haul for Lewis in that trade. But I thought it was great what you did, because to your point, you were able to get guys who can contribute right now that you still have a lot of control over. And it felt like that was very intentional from your end to turn one major league player into 4 quality major league players. So I'm glad to hear that, from you that was really part of your mindset, thinking that way, because it turned out for me to be a great move on your part to make that move but not take a step back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think a lot of times there are chances missed when folks don't shop players. But I also I don't know that that's true, that I really would have gotten that much. Like I really liked the package. I felt like, so I'm not someone, I'm a difficult person to talk trade with, but my goal in a trade is never to like get one over on the other owner, right? I think like there's opportunities. Trades should be mutually beneficial. That's the way good trades happen. That's the way you keep good relationship with other managers. I think this was a great way to sort of get off the trade, to get my first trade in. I felt like it was a great trade for both teams. Andrew gave up good pieces. He was not there trying to steal Royce away from me, especially, and I think the fact that Andrew was able to re-sign Royce, makes that a more palatable package that he gave up. But yeah, I can't, like, I've got literally 3, one of my number 5 starting pitcher, and then my starting first baseman and my starting second baseman all came over in that deal, and they're all playing reasonably well early on. And like you said, they're not going away next year, right? I've got them for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it was I was trying to make an impact trade. I knew I needed to get better to keep up with teams like Chicago and Cincinnati and the Brewers in my division. And so my mindset was, what can I move where I have depth? Where Evan White, moving him allowed me to bring up the rookies that were ready to take over first. Tony Courtney became not needed if I got Lewis back, because I slid Lewis into second. And then Tommy Fernandez was a 4th, 5th outfielder for me, with Aguilera, Adele, and Acuna in the outfield for me. And then people always say, if you're going to make a big move, you have to have one move or one piece of it that makes you like hurt a little bit. That was Mark Jones for me, the pitcher, because boy, I could really use him now with all the injuries my pitching staff has had. Sure. That was the piece that I had to really think about, because that was the one I was just like, I'm giving up pitching depth, but I had to do that in order to make the loser. And I think even though we're only halfway through the season, it's one of the few trades that you can look at and say it was a win-win for both teams. With me, I have an MVP candidate in Lewis, and with you made your whole team better by filling holes in your lineup and your pitching staff that made your team better overall. And heck, it's paying off better for you right now because you're sitting in first place. But I think overall, like JR said, both teams got something positive out of it. And I think, yeah, you may have gotten more in terms of like prospect wise if you had shopped him around, but as JR said, in terms of major league talent, 3 of the 4 guys I sent you had major league games under their belt, and the 4th one, Tony Courtney, I was planning to bring up that season if I didn't get Lewis. So
yeah. Ken, was there one of those players that was kind of, from your perspective, the key for you to get, or that you really had your eye on out of the bunch, saying, this is what I kind of feel like is the prize of the package for my team?
Well, I mean, I knew based on Andrew's farm that Evan White was an easy ask. So it definitely was not. I felt like that one was going to be kind of not that it wasn't a worthy piece to be a part of it, but it wasn't one that he was going to hold tightly, right?
Correct.
But I think Mark Jones was probably the one that tipped the scale to make sure I got the deal. But both him and Courtney are both very key pieces to making me feel comfortable giving up someone of Lewis's caliber. Tommy Fernandez, I think he's still sitting in AAA now. He did get a taste of the bigs. He doesn't have the greatest intangibles there. We'll see what happens, but I think both Courtney and Jones were key pieces that both I think will be a part of the Twins for a long time, and hopefully part of some playoff games.
So taking a step back from the Twins and more talking about you as a GM, since you're one of our newer GMs, like you said, you're about to hit a year, you're about to go through your first draft as a GM, right? You joined after the draft was over last year.
Correct.
So how has your experience in eMLB been so far? Kind of talk through like how'd you get plugged into eMLB, how you ended up as a GM, and how has the experience been so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a blast. So I've found Commish streams because it had drops, and I toyed around with Perfect Team, right? And then I would just put the stream on in the background, and then I started paying a little bit of attention and seeing the community and the community created players, and thought, oh man, this is pretty cool. And somebody gifted me a sub, and I created a player, Tom Kazansky, who's in the Dodgers organization, Iceman from Top Gun. And then shortly after, like, it really wasn't a long time watching and going through and starting the CCP stuff, right around when the draft happened, and there were a couple openings, and I sent Commish a message. I had started to become a little bit active in chat with getting the CCP. I didn't really expect, I thought maybe there would be a little bit more competition. I didn't really think I would have a chance at getting a squad. And it was Oakland and Minnesota were both open. And he messaged me saying, hey, I think you might be a good fit. And he actually, so Danny Smith was also joining. And obviously his community interaction at that time was tremendous. So he gave Danny the choice, and Danny chose Oakland, which I am eternally grateful. That challenge, that's a tough challenge, man. I'm not sure I would have been fully prepared to take on that.
Shout out to the current GM of the Oakland A's, Kenny Limber. Good luck.
I actually had, I'm in 2 other online leagues, and both of them, I don't have a ton of online experience. I really like, I found OOTP through Spore, and I mostly toyed around with Perfect Team, and then I happened upon a couple of online leagues. But one of them I did start out as Oakland's GM. I would since moved over to St. Louis, and very much enjoy that budget compared to Oakland. But I have seen that side of it, and it is tough. So not that Minnesota's cash heavy, but it's at least and just the starting point, right, with the squad. I mean, I did the Royce Lewis trade, and I've done some free agent stuff, but it's not like I totally remade this team in my image.
Not yet.
I'm mostly building off of what was already there.
You definitely had some building blocks to work from, at least, whereas Oakland, was in pretty rough shape. So you kind of lucked out on that one a little bit.
For sure.
And actually, it's funny talking about like moves you made that kind of had impact. It was funny when this was during the offseason, you started signing a bunch of shortstops. Like you signed, was it Louis Guillaume and Willie Adames early on in free agency? Everyone started speculating at that time that you were looking to trade Royce Lewis. We hadn't even started talking yet at that point. Like you were making those moves before we started talking.
Yeah, so I will say, Adames I had always looked at as a third baseman, right? That's where I wanted him to play. He was listed as a shortstop, and I actually just recently made a move. Guillaume versus lefties is I think his WRC plus is 5. So I made the decision to move Adames over to third or Adames to short and Faltine at third versus lefties. But I offered both Adames and Guillorme, not really expecting to get them both. I thought I was going to get one of those two. And I ended up getting them both, which was fine, especially after dealing Royce Lewis. But even without dealing Royce Lewis, if I left Faltine down, Guillorme has tremendous defense stats at second, third, and short. He would have been fine filling in that role if I needed to. His bat is nothing to, versus righties he's fine, but versus lefties he's very bad. But yeah, so I made those offers, and I really, like you said, I didn't have some grand plan of dealing Royce Lewis when I made those offers. I just thought I definitely needed at least one on the left side of my infield. I wanted to get one. So I offered 2 players that I thought were a decent fit, and they both ended up signing.
So going into the next couple weeks, this will be your first experience in the eMLB first player draft.
Yes.
What are your? I know. So you got to watch it last year. What were your impressions from a spectator standpoint watching? I think your player got drafted last year's draft, correct? And
he did. Yeah, he went in the second round.
Yeah. So. Yeah. How are you expecting things to go this year now that you're sitting in the GM seat as opposed to last year when you went through it as a player?
Yeah, I really should go back in the archives and see if I can watch that, because I did not watch it from the perspective of like how I would handle it as a GM. So I really don't even remember well. I know it's a very involved process. I actually I hadn't really, I don't know if you guys have started like scouting all the prospective draft guys.
Yep.
I really hadn't started that. And then I have an AL Central chat, and Cleveland was like, mentioned that they saw my CCP. And I had not seen it posted in Discord yet. So I was like, I don't even know how you know that I made him. So Dwayne Elizondo, Mountain Dew Camacho will be
yes,
will be a CCP in this upcoming draft.
Yeah. So I think I know why you didn't notice that Kamish added him. So what Kamish does is he has one chat block that he set up to he tagged everyone in it when he first made it and said these are the players that have been added to the draft. He goes back and edits that post and adds in the other players, but when you edit a message, it doesn't tag people again, so no one ever knows when he updates it. He just kind of goes back and updates it.
I looked at that message extremely closely, because when Sadier messaged me, I was like, I don't even know, how do you even know that President Camacho is coming? And he is not in the list yet. And I actually got a message.
I'm looking at him right now. Actually, he's in the list.
Okay, when was it? I think it was just added because Kamish messaged me today and said he still needed to create him.
Well, he must have just created him then, because I'm looking. Dwayne Elizondo Camacho.
Yeah.
Love that name.
Yeah, it's. Are you familiar with the reference?
I was about to ask you what the reference was, because there must be a reference behind this.
He's the president in Idiocracy. His nickname is Mountain Dew, or his full name is actually Dwayne Elizondo Mountain Dew Herbert Camacho. And he's the president he's a former wrestler that's now the president of the United States in the movie Idiocracy, which if you haven't seen, you should definitely go watch. It's hilarious. And
well, shout out to that.
A little bit too on point.
Yeah, you could say we experienced that movie.
Yes.
And just a quick shout out on our YouTube channel where you all are watching this right now. You can actually go back and watch last year's draft. It is recorded and uploaded on this YouTube channel. Just go back into the archives for about this. What was it, about July last year that we did it? I can't remember. But all of the rounds of the draft that were streamed are up there. So if you want to go take a look at what the draft was last year, what you can potentially expect to see this year, go ahead and check those out. Make sure to subscribe and click the notification bell while you're at it. Had to do the quick YouTube plug that every YouTuber does.
Absolutely. I am already subscribed, but I probably will be going back in that video and watching.
Absolutely. Awesome.
Now related to the draft, Ken, now, have you thought much so far about kind of what your philosophy is going to be in terms of Did I take your
You
question?
took my question. Yep, we're good. Same mind.
just in terms of, are you looking kind of best player available? Like, do you have more of an idea toward, high school, college, develop potential? Have you thought much about kind of what your approach is going to be there?
So I don't typically care too much about where in the development guys are, high school versus college. Now, obviously, like 22, 23 years old, that's I'm a little bit more wary of those guys, unless their current rating is higher. But I'm mostly a best player available. I think as you get later in drafts, I tend to look closer at some of those intangibles. I mean, obviously they matter at the top too, but that potential rating sticks out to me pretty strong. And I do think like part of going back and watching last year's draft is getting a feel for like how because there's eMLB is very unique with the 1.0 guys and the CCPs and the other MLB players that aren't in the system, right? That commission's taking all the time to build.
J-Rod is in this year.
I feel like there's a very different talent pool than what I might be used to in those other online leagues where, the draft dries up kind of quickly. I feel like there's more talent to mine in this one. So I'm going to have to pay a little more attention to the draft pool than I maybe do in the other leagues where I don't focus as much on it. But yeah, I'm very much a best player available most of the time. I'm not overly picky with positions. And I just kind of see where the talent is. Obviously I'm not going after relievers in the first usually. But outside
Very
of that,
few people are.
outside of that, position doesn't really matter too much to me. As I mentioned in the beginning, I do care about defense. I don't want a bunch of, as well as the Phillies are doing in real life this year. That's not the philosophy that I have when I'm building a team. I want good fielding behind my pitching.
All right. So let's go to a topic that isn't necessarily directly related to you, but it will have an impact on you. What do you think obviously we still have a lot more information that needs to come out on this topic, but talking about the expansion that's coming this year at the end of this season, do you have an idea of how you're going to approach potential player protection as we prepare for the expansion draft? I know we don't know exactly how that's going to work yet. We're still waiting on those details, but how do you think that will affect your team going into the offseason?
Yeah, it's a big unknown for me. I really don't know what to expect as far as what the protection rules are going to be. It's always a little bit scary knowing like you're building the team to be what you want it to be. And then we're going to open it up and two new teams are going to come in and get to pick and choose a few players off of, again, there are protections. So it's not like they're going to have, an open ability to just take anybody. But, I think obviously cheaper controlled players, I'm going to be a lot more likely to protect. And I don't have a lot of, long-term high dollar contracts out there. But there's a couple that I think I'd be willing to sort of maybe put out there into the expansion draft and maybe not be too disappointed if they go. Not that there's any negative with the players, but just like they maybe don't fit exactly what I have in mind. I've not done. I actually did do I haven't done a lot of offline stuff. I did toy around one time with trying to do an expansion, but that was where I was an expansion team, and I let the computer sort of do their own protection. So I really haven't done it from the other perspective and seen how that interaction goes. So I don't have a plan yet. And like I said before, I don't have grand plans that I'm building the team to. I just kind of take things as they go and manage that way and see how it works. So far, it's working out pretty well this year. I don't know. We'll see how it goes going forward.
So as we come up on the announcement for the last team that will be added, give us your prediction as to where this new Team 32 is going to be.
Man, I don't even know. I don't even know where to guess. I think Nashville is a pretty popular city that comes up in expansion talks. So you have a good AAA facility there, I believe. So I guess that would be my guess, but I don't really have any. I'm not basing that off anything other than it's a city I've heard mentioned in real MLB expansion talks. So I guess that's as good a guess as any.
All right, JR, what about you? I can't say anything because I'm in the expansion committee, so I actually know what Team 32 is. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I'm curious to hear your prediction, JR.
I know there's been a lot of cities thrown out, and I think Kamish has dispelled some of them. I mean,
he specifically dispelled Vegas because he wants to keep that open in case the real Oakland A's move to Vegas. That's the only one he said that's an absolute veto.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I could easily see Portland. I mean, Portland, I think, would make a lot of sense. I could see, a spot like, Sacramento. Sacramento's had a AAA team for a really long time. For me, those would probably be the top two that I think of immediately. But you never know.
Interesting. My lips are sealed. But for those of you watching, make sure to join the broadcast for the eMLB All-Star Game because Team 32 will be revealed at the All-Star Game festivities. So make sure, I think it's October 30th that's going to be taking place. The Sunday stream with the commish is going to be the Team 32 reveal, as well as celebrating the fact we already know Team 31 is Montreal. That was announced from the get-go. So a lot less mystery around that one. As I believe Tranquil is the GM of the Expos, and then we have Attica, who's going to be the GM of Team 32. And I know both of them are excited to get going as GMs.
Do we know, is Kamish going to announce the realignment division changes at the same time, or does that come later?
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
I do know the realigned divisions has been a topic of discussion for the expansion committee. But that's all I'm going to say. I don't know when he's planning to reveal those.
Okay.
So more to come on that. So stay tuned to both the YouTube channel and Kamish's Twitch channel for all the updates as it becomes available about the expansion of eMLB, a historic season in 2027 coming up as we expand to 32 teams. JR, do you have any more questions for our illustrious Twins GM before we sign off?
I think if we go back to, kind of where we started, we talked about kind of where you're at in the season. Now, obviously, essentially, we just got into July in game with our last sim. So basically halfway.
Trade deadline's coming up.
Halfway through the season. Trade deadline's coming up. All-Star game's coming up. All these things coming up. But if you look at your team internally, is there one or two players that you would identify to say, these guys are going to be the key to my team being able to, either maintain the lead in the AL Central or, even if you potentially lose the lead, still maintain a playoff spot as you head into the end of the season?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously I've got Laron and Kirilloff who are killing it at the plate. I need other guys to come through at the plate. So whether that's I'd love it if Robles could get his batting gear. Courtney had a great start to the year, cooled off a little bit lately. His WR or OPS plus is down to 73. I'd like to get those guys' bats going again. I think that would be a very huge part of keeping my current position or maybe extending the lead a little bit. You mentioned the trade deadline. Like everything, it all comes down to me finding ways to get my offense up a little bit. I think to really help get me to the postseason. I've got great defense. I really like my rotation. Some of my ERAs are a little bit higher than I think they should be. But I like the pitchers that I have there. And really, I think some of that is, I have a good starter ERA rank. It's just the number that I'm seeing there is not necessarily what I'm used to in other environments. So I like my starting pitching. I need those bats to come through. So, I would say probably Robles and Courtney would be the two that I'd like to see step it up.
And just for the record, as somebody who at the beginning of the season predicted the Twins to be in the playoffs, I can't say that I'm too surprised by what we've seen.
Okay, but you
I
did predict
appreciate
them
that.
to win
It's in stark contrast to the bulletin board material provided by our esteemed Braves GM, who thought I was going to win 64 games. Don't think I won't bring that up when I hit that number.
Calling out Aiden from Here's Why You're Wrong, who have been MIA over the past couple of weeks. We need to see a reply from Aiden on that one. I will say though, JR, you did not predict them to win the division.
I did not, but I did predict them to make the postseason.
This is true. You did predict them as one of the wild card teams.
And I think you called Colby Halter for Rookie of the Year.
I did.
He's one of my failed follower attempts. I tried to use him as a follower instead of a straight starter, and his start to the season was rough. Yeah, his ERA has come down. He's been pitching better of late, but
June. He had a really good month of June. So if he keeps that up, my prediction could be a dark horse to sneak back to the top.
That's right.
All right. Well, Ken, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We really appreciate you coming on and giving us a little bit of an inside scoop into the Twins organization, as well as you as a member of the eMLB community. And if anyone else out there would like to come on and be interviewed by the eMLB Insider, we would love to have more people on as we get back into these interview segments that we did last year. We definitely missed them. We wanted to bring them back sooner, but season's been a little weird this year with all of these breaks and issues with the files and all this kind of stuff. So, but Ken, thank you so much for joining us. We really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Next time I'll have a Twins hat. This is a Rochester Red Wings hat though, so it's my AAA affiliate.
There you go. It works.
There you go.
Thanks,
I love seeing all the different hats that people have. I still remember Tim last time he was on, kept switching hats in between interview segments.
I have a lot of hats. I could definitely do that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Ken. And next up, JR and I are going to get into everyone's favorite segment, the power rankings. So that's coming up next. Thank you again, Ken, for joining us for that interview. We love having GMs and CCPs come on the podcast. So I know I mentioned this earlier, but if you guys want to be a part of these interview segments, please reach out to us. We would love to have more people on. I know this is the first one we had this year. We wanted to do them earlier, but like I said earlier, the scheduling has kind of been crazy for us. So, but we would like to do that in the future. We are looking to get people that are community created players specifically for our draft interview special. So please reach out to us if you want to be a part of that, as well as we are probably going to have some interviews with the brand new expansion team GMs. Maybe we can try to do that. I don't know. Maybe it just depends on their schedule, but hopefully we can get some more GMs on, including the new expansion GMs as well. But it is now time for everyone's favorite segment. It is time for the power rankings. As I get them set up over here, we're actually going to take a look at where the power rankings were, where we last left them. I'm not going to do the how many they moved up and moved down, because I can't really do that with this new setup, but we can at least look at where we had the power rankings of the teams the last we left them. Both of us had the Astros and Angels 1 and 2. I had the Mariners 3, which, spoiler alert, that's not going to be the case this time. You had the Giants at 3. And then going through the rest of mine, I had Cubs 4, Giants 5, Twins 6, Orioles 7, Padres 8 as it blends in with the background, Dodgers 9, and Red Sox 10. You had Mariners 4, Cubs 5, Twins 6, Orioles 7, Boston 8, San Diego 9, and the Cardinals at 10. So I'm going to clear the board.
Clear the board.
And we are going to start. You can actually go ahead. If you want to go ahead and start talking about your number 10 team while I clear the board, go for it.
So at number 10, I do have the Cleveland Indians, currently at second place in the AL Central. We were joking earlier a little bit about Sadier and his like for trades, but I do have to give him props because a lot of what is driving this team this year are some of the moves that he's made here in the offseason and the early part of the season. Getting a lot of contributions from some of these guys. Made a trade with Pittsburgh that allowed him to pick up, Forrest Hyder, who's played really well at catcher. Whip Sentner in that rotation. He's made 7 starts since coming over. He's 4-0 with a ERA under 3. Brandon Dieter, he picked up from the Phillies, has played fairly well. Don Erickson picked up from the Brewers in a trade, has 17 home runs, hitting over 300 with an OPS over 1,000. So a lot of these guys that he's picked up in some of these deals that were, in some cases, under the radar deals or under the radar players have worked out and, have combined with, the Aaron Judge pickup over the offseason, the continued presence of Francisco Lindor, Martin Bradford joining that rotation. And I really like the way things are heading there in Cleveland.
Well, you and I are of the same mindset for this one because I've also got Cleveland at number 10 for pretty much all the same reasons you said. They do have a top 5 offense in the American League, which is nothing to sneeze at considering 2 of the top offenses are over there in the AL West. They do, I think their area of improvement, they might be a team looking to add a pitcher at the deadline. They're not horrible in terms of pitching, but I think that's the place where they can improve. They also could potentially improve if they want to try to add some defense, but they have to ask themselves if they want to sacrifice the offense in order to do so. So I think it makes more sense. They might be a team that looks to add to their pitching depth for the trade deadline. And it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be one of these like blockbuster moves where they add an ace or a number 2 to the rotation. I think they add someone to like the back end of their rotation to kind of solidify, basically make sure that they have at least a chance to win every 5 games. Because right now, the back of their rotation is Kyle Hendricks, and he is not having a very good season.
No.
So I think that 5th spot in the rotation is the place to improve, and I think the Indians go out and do so.
Yeah, and it's always a delicate place to be in when you're a team like the Indians here, who you could make the argument maybe they're competing a little bit ahead of schedule, with some of the young players that they have. So it's that balance between, do we make some kind of move that could shake things up and help us this year, but, maybe, takes us out of our plans for what we have, or do we kind of stay the course and basically, just see if this ride continues.
Absolutely. All right. So my number 9 team, I always hate when I do this because it just feels like a homer pick, but I'm putting my Cardinals at number 9. I'm finally putting them onto my top 10, I think for the first time all season, if I'm not mistaken. The Cardinals picked it up at the very end of June, and they have won 8 out of their last 10 games. They have put themselves into second place in the National League Central behind the Cubs, technically tied with the Brewers still. But the offense is finally starting to come around. We saw Ronald Acuna really step it up in the month of June to the tune of he had over 1,000 OPS. Not as high as Benny the Jet Rodriguez's OPS, as we mentioned him earlier. Now, Royce Lewis did take a little bit of a step back in June, but fortunately some other players in that lineup stepped up. Speak like Benny Rodriguez. Joe Adell has been performing better offensively this year than he was last year. We know he's a stud defensively, but his batting could be a little streaky. He hit better in the month of June. And so with those players leading the way, the Cardinals picked it up at the end of June. Like I said, have won 8 out of their last 12. Their pitching has been solid all year, but the problem is their bullpen keeps giving up leads. They actually have it's the only pitching category that they're not top 10 in or top 5 in is their bullpen ERA in 8th. And I made a little post in the Discord today comparing Jose Leclerc's this season stats with a combined last 2 years. He's already given up 4 home runs and 42 innings pitched this year. He gave up a total of 3 home runs over 100 innings pitched combined the last 2 seasons, and he's already blown 4 saves. And that the amount of saves that the Cardinals bullpen has given up has been a little bit scary. So if their bullpen can get back to the performance that they are expected to, their pitching is going to be fine. And if they can keep getting that batting up a little bit and keep improving as they saw in the month of June, they could hopefully will make a run at the division title.
Yeah, I actually have the Cardinals here as well, and at the 9 spot.
All right, you didn't just look at my list, did you?
Are we sharing the same Google Doc?
I actually didn't make a Google Doc, so either we are very on the same page, or you're hacking into my computer right now.
Again, you mentioned a lot of it there. I think one of the big things for your team this year so far is that after losing Jack Flaherty really early in the season and losing Loaizaga, there toward the end of May, the starting pitching has, sort of, recovered a bit from that. Jonathan Stever has been really great for you this year. Tanner Burns, has pitched pretty well. If Jeremy Frank could just get back close to what, he doesn't have the worst ERA in the world, but
compared to last year, it's like, what the heck happened?
Right. When you look back at last year, where he, was a strong contender for Rookie of the Year and Cy Young, you were definitely expecting more out of him this year than that. So, if he can start to look more like 2025 Jeremy Frank here in the second half, that combined with some of those guys stepping up on offense could really give you a shot to make a run at the Cubs.
And actually, one of those backup pitchers who wasn't given an opportunity to start at the beginning, I went with a couple other players, but Michael Sanborn has made now, how many starts has he made? He's now made 4 starts. Over his total of 13 appearances, including his 4 starts, he still only has a 1.32 ERA so far. And he has, let's see, over his 4 starts, he has given up a total of 2 earned runs and 3 or a total of 3 runs, 2 of them earned. And if he can keep that up, that is a huge boost to the Cardinals rotation, as we were struggling we've been moving pieces in and out of the back end of that rotation after the injuries, like you mentioned. Sanborn is sticking right now, and hopefully he keeps up that performance.
Yeah, absolutely.
So who you got at number 8?
So for me at number 8, I've got the Baltimore Orioles. I've got Brendan's team there. In some ways, I think they've kind of benefited a little bit from that AL East. Really, some of those other teams kind of not being what we thought they were going to be. The Red Sox, haven't been quite as hot as they were last year. Tampa Bay, we talked about at the very beginning of the show, just one of the real disappointments this season. You have the Yankees, who've played better than I think people thought they would, but we all don't really think that can last, and they're actually still looking to move some of their players. So they'll become you have to think a lot less of any kind of factor there here soon if they make some more of those deals. So in some ways, you almost feel like Baltimore's kind of where they're at a little bit by default. But Brendan has made some moves here during the course of the season. I say some moves as in a lot of moves.
Second only to Sadier, but
with his team. But obviously, I love the move that ultimately ended up with them getting Andrew Vaughn to add to that offense.
Oh yeah, that was a huge deal.
Such a big pickup. I mean, it took a couple moves to get there with the San Diego trade to get Mejia, and then flipping Mejia to Kansas City, for some pieces, including Vaughn. But I love the idea of having Vaughn there, kind of in the middle of that lineup, hitting after Nick Spence and Buster Bluth. Definitely, adds to that lineup being formidable. And it's just kind of a matter of what's going to happen with that pitching staff.
Yeah, I was going to point out that, well, maybe I should save it for when I talk about the Orioles, but you would think that the move for Andrew Vaughn, that they're focusing on the wrong thing. Their pitching is what's holding them back right now, not their offense.
Yeah.
So, But for my number 8, it's actually not the Orioles, so we don't have an exact copy of each other. I actually went with the Seattle Mariners. I actually dropped them 4 spots from the number 4 all the way down to number 8, and that month of June was brutal for the Seattle Mariners. Specifically, they went 11-17 for a 392 win percentage, coming off of back-to-back 600 percentage points, 14-9 and 17-11. They literally flipped their May record. They went 17-11 in May and then went 17-11 in May and 11-17 in June. There we go. But yeah, I can't get these words out. But like we mentioned earlier, they had the big problem against the Minnesota Twins, dropping 6 out of the 7 games that they played against each other. Their offense has kind of fallen off. Their pitching, like we mentioned earlier, they don't have a pitcher of the month this month, so that kind of fell off a little bit. Is this team? It's looking like they rely on the home run ball more than any other team that you see. They are 13th in the American League in batting average, 12th in on base percentage, but 2nd in home runs. So this is a team. It's the literal definition of all or nothing. So if they aren't getting those home runs and they aren't getting solid pitching, which they are getting from their starting rotation, but not so much from their bullpen, it's going to be cause for trouble. And I think a little bit of that is catching up to them this month.
Yeah, you were talking about their performance earlier, and we talked with GT about his team taking, I think it was 6 out of 7 from them in the month of June. The Mariners also lost 4 straight to the Tigers. Another team that has really been disappointing this year. So dropping 4 straight to them, that on top of the 6 out of 7 to Minnesota. Minnesota's been really good, but 4 straight to the Tigers, that's a little alarming there, probably for Hetza's squad.
Yeah. I'm going to take a pause here on this power rankings because I just realized we forgot to talk about one of the biggest news pieces in the month of June. And I don't know if either of these teams are showing up on our power rankings list, so I'm going to talk about it now because the Dodgers and the Brewers made a whale of a deal in the month of June. And I can't believe we forgot to talk about this when we were doing the June recap. But we need to talk about that for a second.
I thought about bringing it up, but I wasn't sure how much time we were going to spend on June.
Oh, who cares? We're here to talk about the major news stories, and that was a major news story. So we're going to pause on the power rankings and talk about this. We're gonna talk about this. Hold on, let me find the details because it had to be split into 2 trades because of how many players were moved. But okay. So actually, I'm gonna pull it up in the Discord because it has everything in one place instead of splitting it up into 2 trades. So the biggest piece that was moved was stud shortstop, one of the best shortstop in the entire league, Darius D-Mac McKenzie of the Milwaukee Brewers, went over to the Los Angeles Dodgers along with center fielder Austin Lynch and pitcher Javier Felix for a plethora of prospects, including the Teddy Bear, Teddy Kemp, first base prospect, Roy Helton, Arturo Seymour, Juan Rivas, Luis Morales, Matthew Allen, and Isaac Rodriguez. And how many of these were top 100 prospects? 1, 2, 3, 4 of them were top 100 prospects, including Juan Rivas, the number 7 prospect in all of baseball. Holy moly, when this trade dropped, everyone was like, what in the world just happened? And actually, I will talk about it in the context of power rankings. This is why I put Cleveland in at number 10 over Milwaukee. I almost have Milwaukee at 10, but I think what they gave up is not going to keep them in contention this year. They started falling off a little bit after this trade. They've lost more than they've won recently since the trade. And I think that while this definitely sets them up to be really good in the future, I think this kind of, even though they were in second place, I don't know if they're giving up on this season, but it seems like they put themselves in a worse position to compete this year, for the reason of building for the future. Maybe they thought they weren't going to be able to re-sign D-Mac. Maybe that's a possibility with the arbitration coming up. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was absolutely floored that Jason Hillman, the GM of the Brewers, would look to trade D-Mac at this point. Again, we don't know. Maybe he tried to sign him to extension and and the asking price was just so astronomical, that Jason, wasn't really willing to invest that. But man, you're talking about a player who last year had over an 8 WAR, somebody that is, like you said, one of the best players, most, overall top to bottom best players in the league. And really, when you look at Milwaukee's finances, I mean, they don't have a ton of contracts committed for the future. So, I mean, that's definitely a haul of talent coming back. I mean, if you trade a guy like DMAC, that's the kind of return that you should get. Talking about just boatloads of prospect talent, but for me, it would just be so tough to trade such a generational talent like that. When your team is performing fairly well, and when at least from outside, it looks like you may have the resources to lock them up.
Yeah, and we talked earlier with Ken about the trade for Royce Lewis, and we talked about how he didn't shop his player around because he felt like what he was getting back was a really good deal, beneficial because he got major league talent. But is this the kind of deal you might have expected to see with Royce Lewis if he had shopped him around and we're getting prospects back instead of major league talent?
It could have been. I mean,
now, obviously, DMAC wasn't the only player that went over to the Dodgers. He added a couple more nothing to sneeze at pieces as well. Not just another CCP, Austin Lynch, and then pitcher Javier Felix.
Yeah, Javier Felix. So definitely more than DMAC going back to the Dodgers, but yeah, it could have been something. I mean, DMAC is definitely a more electric player than Royce Lewis is, but perhaps that's something he could have shopped around. But again, as he said, he wasn't necessarily looking for prospect capital as much as he was looking for guys who could, really play right away at the major league level. A couple of these guys that are the high rated prospects are, 18 years old, still years and years away. Lots of opportunity to, flame out or turn into something special. So, Jason obviously picked up some good bats there that, will be ready soon with Seymour and Teddy Kemp. So, there's definitely going to be some talent there that can hit Milwaukee sooner rather than later, but it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it kind of, like I said, it pushed them out of the top 10 for me because I think the overall talent at his major league level went down. Obviously, his farm system got a huge boost.
Right.
And like in the future, this team's going to be really good. So, but it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out because at the time of the trade, they were in second place in the NL Central, and I think they had the second wildcard spot even. So we'll see what happens from there. So back to the power rankings. We kind of already touched on them, but I actually had the Orioles at 7. Where you had them at 8. And I mean, I kind of already made this point. They need some pitching help, and they've made a couple of waiver moves. They made the trade that was essentially a waiver claim, just a priority waiver claim, essentially. Like, hey, I'll take the player off your hands if you're going to give him away for free. Sure.
Right.
So yeah, they just need some pitching help, and Brendan, the GM of the Orioles, keeps mixing up his rotations. Like right now, he's listed as a 3-person rotation, for whatever that's worth. He's done bullpen games, he's done opener, starter, or followers. He's trying to do whatever he can to figure out the right combination that works in the rotation. And if he doesn't figure it out soon, Boston's offense might be even more. It's basically offense versus offense right now, and I think Boston's offense has the edge. If Baltimore can't pick up its pitching, it's going to be hard to keep Boston away.
Yeah. And, for me at number 7, I've got the Mariners. So we just kind of had those two teams, flip-flopped a little bit. You addressed really everything about Seattle. I think I'm going to be curious to see if Hetz goes after some bullpen help at the trade deadline. I think, that we touched on their starting rotation has looked pretty solid. Their lineup, you have to figure that some of those guys are going to bounce back and start hitting the ball a little bit better. But I think bullpen-wise, that's one of those areas that, a lot of the top teams have been good about making sure they have a strong bullpen heading into the playoffs. And I think, Hetz is probably going to look to see what he can do to help fortify that.
Absolutely. What you got at number 6?
Number 6, I have the Minnesota Twins. We had GT on with us earlier. Part of me wanted to put the Twins a little bit higher in these rankings. Just I really like their squad, but just they had a little bit of a right around 500 record there in June. Again, like we talked about with him, it was a pretty robust schedule, playing a lot of the top teams, especially a lot of games with the AL West. So in a way, it's kind of kudos for coming out of that, with a record around 500 when you're facing that many good teams. But I just love what they have starting pitching wise. Emerson Hancock has probably been their best starting pitcher, but Bruce DeGratwall, Brandon Woodruff, Kobe Halter starting to pitch better. They're getting just enough offense from a couple of their stars there, and if they can find a way to get some contributions from a couple extra guys here in the second half, I think they should be able to hold on to that top spot there in the AL Central.
And once again, we are on the same page because I also have the Twins at number 6. I was so ready to move them up the power rankings when they were absolutely blowing away the Seattle Mariners in the middle of that month. But as he mentioned, he just couldn't pull away from the AL Central. The rival teams pulled him back down closer as he ended up getting swept by Cleveland, who's 2 games behind them now. And as he mentioned, he needs people to step up at the plate other than Kirilloff and Laron Smith. If he can get that off, it was funny. He was talking about it during the interview. It sounded like it was my team. Like in order to compete and keep this momentum going, the offense needs to step up. I'm like, hey, that's me. Decent pitching, not enough hitting. We need people to step up. I can relate to that. So, but the matter of fact is they're leading the division and my team isn't. So they're in a better spot right now. And that's why they're up at number 6 instead of down where I am at number 9. So at number 5, I have where are they? It's going to blend in with the background. San Diego Padres. As I mentioned earlier, the Padres are, in terms of the teams in the National League, they are probably the most balanced team that is near the top. They are not the top team in any category, but they are consistently top 5 across pretty much all the categories that you can think of. And they are the only team that is leading a division in the National League or even in the wild card race that is doing so. We talked earlier about the Giants need hitting, the Cubs need pitching, the Cardinals need hitting, and who knows what's going on with all the National League East teams. But the Padres are right now the most balanced team, and I would not be surprised if they are able to overtake the Giants if the Giants don't address their hitting.
Yeah, and I actually have the Giants here in that number 5 spot.
Ooh.
I'll go ahead and say I have the Padres, in the number 4 spot. I went back and forth kind of between those two, and again, I'm a big fan of the Giants. Again, not to pat myself on the back, I did predict the Giants to win the NL West at the beginning of the season. So, I really like a lot of what Mike has done with that team. I love the 2-headed monster there in the starting rotation. But I do find that the offense concerning. Michael Sean Kane and Danny King can only do so much. I mean, you got to have some help for those guys. Whereas the Padres are a more complete team right now, and they're coming off. They've been really hot now for 2 months. If you go back in through June and May, they're on a 35-19 clip over those 2 months. So they've been playing really well for 2 months now. They're just a game back of the Giants, and I think if you match those two teams up in a 5-game series, a 7-game series, as much as part of me would want to give the advantage to the Giants because of their 2 aces at the top. I think I would favor the Padres in a matchup like that for right now.
Yeah, it all goes back to that balance. Like with the Padres, they are good really good on both sides of the ball. Whereas you can, like with the Padres, it's like you can't really identify an obvious weakness because they're at least decent at everything they do.
Yeah.
Whereas the Giants and the Cubs and the Cardinals, you can really like, there's their weakness. They need to fix that. So, but number 4, I've actually, if I remember correctly, yes, I've actually got the Cubs at number 4, and it's mostly because, and I'll go ahead and say I've got the Giants at 3, and the reason why I have it this way is because, and this is going to be like a broken record at this point. I believe in better pitching over better hitting. I believe pitching takes you farther than hitting does. And because the Giants have such a dominating pitching staff, I think that's why they're currently the better team. But 3, 4, 5, Giants, Cubs, Padres, they're all right there with each other. Like you could, like, it looks like you're going to mix this up. You could make an argument for both of our, the way we have them ranked. But for me personally, I value pitching more than I value hitting, which makes sense when you look at my team. But so I think because of that, I kind of looked at it as I knew I was going to put the Padres at 5 because their record is still, they still need to build their record to surpass the Giants and Cubs. But I felt if I matched up the Giants and the Cubs right now, who would have the advantage? And I think the Giants would have the advantage of their pitching. I think it's more likely that the Giants pitching shuts down the Cubs offense than the Cubs offense takes advantage of the Giants pitching. So that's where my mind was there.
Yeah, it's definitely a fair point, and I think for me, I feel very strongly about that Giants pitching as well. I think if they can just get a little bit of help on offense, for me, they instantly become the top threat in the National League.
So does that mean you have the Cubs at 3?
I've got the Cubs at 3. Yeah, to go all Denny Green, that offense is what we thought it was. I mean, they're just hammering the ball all over the place with all kinds of depth. From Kent Herbeck to Danny White to Danny Smith Jr. to Jackie Roberts, even Carson Kelly. The catcher has been hitting well. The lineup is just really stacked top to bottom and leading the National League in so many categories. That they're just really outslugging a lot of people right now. Going 17-9 here, or 17-10, sorry, in the month of June. I think again, it's going to come down to what they do to address the pitching wise. But man, that lineup is just so scary. There's a lot of teams that aren't going to want to face them.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. So our 1 and 2 pretty obvious here. Should we just go ahead and put them both up? Because I'm pretty sure we have the same 1 and 2.
I can't imagine that we have anything different here than Houston 1 and LA 2.
Absolutely. I was tempted to just leave them up there when I cleared the board because that's what we had last time.
Right.
But I figured we'd keep people at least a little bit of suspense. But honestly, can you really have it any other way right now?
Houston has been just on a tear from Jump Street on opening day. I mean, I don't know if it's been constantly playing our insider podcast from the off season before each game for the guys to get them fired up. But whatever.
Speaking of listening to the insider, apparently my comment about the Dodgers is what prompted the Darius McKenzie trade. Apparently me saying that none of the bats in the Dodgers lineup scares them prompted the trade. So apparently people are influenced by the eMLB insider. Maybe we should start sneaking in some things that I want teams to do that they shouldn't do. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
hey Cubs, don't get pitching. You're fine.
Yeah. Clearly we have an impact on the league with this podcast way more than we ever thought.
What am I going to do with this power? I must use it for nope.
But yeah, I mean, these two squads just decimating people. I mean, Houston came back to earth a little bit in the month of June. I mean, they didn't quite duplicate their 23-6 record that was in May. Yeah. Just obscene.
Yeah.
But man, just a couple of really stacked rosters there, top to bottom.
The Houston Astros, in terms of American League rankings, they are first in runs scored, and they are first in runs allowed. They have a run differential of plus 149. And in fact, that is such a high number that they are actually underperforming based on their Pythagorean record, which goes off of what your run differential is. They're actually one win fewer than what the Pythagorean record says they should have. They should be one game better than they are based on their run differential. And just to put that in perspective, there is only one other team in the entire major leagues that has a run differential over 100, and they're at 149. JR, quiz time. Who do you think that team is?
Well, I have to be honest. I just looked and saw that it was the San Diego Padres.
Yeah, it's the Padres. The Padres are at 109, and then right after that, you got the Angels at 95, the Giants at 92, and then from there, it's pretty much a drop off into the 60s with the Cubs.
Yeah, and also to put in perspective, just what kind of difference there is between the Astros at the top of the league and the A's at the bottom of the league.
Oh no!
You mentioned the.
Do you have to bring that up? Do you have to bring it up?
The 149 positive run differential for the Astros is contrasted by the 142 negative run differential for the A's, which is why they're already 31 and a half games behind the Astros in the division.
However, there is a team that's actually close to the A's in terms of negative run differential, and that's the Colorado Rockies at minus 130. So, yeah. Now, if we're going to keep talking about run differential, there's another team that just missed my top 10, a division leader. There's a division leader that actually has a negative run differential right now. That's the Philadelphia Phillies at minus 24. They actually have 6 games more than their Pythagorean record says.
Yeah, that was the big reason I left them off the top 10. I just, I'm they're a division leader, and hey, kudos to Hebrew for having them where they are, but I just can't in good conscience put a team in the top 10 with a negative run differential.
Yep. All right, here's the main question. We know the Astros and the Angels are the top 2 teams. We already discussed earlier that these 2 teams are not going to just rest and cruise. They are going to want to take that division title from each other. Which team makes the first big trade?
I think it's Houston. I think, Ben, he has probably a little bit more reason to make a move, knowing that he had lost Aaron Nola earlier in the year to injury from the starting rotation. I think I could see him going out and getting a starting pitcher from someone.
All right. Do you think they're both looking at trades right now, or are they kind of playing trade chicken where they see what the other team does first?
I don't know. I think both of them, both Tom and Ben strike me as guys who probably aren't going to get caught up in too much of what the other team is doing and are, pretty even keel about, focusing on their team and what they may need to address. At the same time, I also feel like Tom in particular is a guy who is always looking to potentially tweak and improve his team. So it wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if he's already having conversations with a few people about
what top end reliever do you think Tom is getting this year? Because he always seems to trade for a top end reliever.
That's what I mean. It's like, he always seems to have, like, even if it's just a small, relatively small move to make, that he's always got something in mind to tweak his team. So, I absolutely could see something like that coming. Maybe Jordan Hicks from the Reds will be going to one of these teams at the trade deadline.
Are you trying to speak that into existence? Hey, everyone, we're listening to the eMLB Insider. We have an influence on the league. Listen to JR. He's putting Hicks out there.
It could happen.
Yeah.
It could happen.
Classic line for Angels in the outfield. Hey, it could happen.
Now, one question I've got for you, Andrew, before we start to wind down here. We took a look earlier at the division leaders. We're taking a look at our top 10 here. If you had to pick one division leader that is most likely to not make the playoffs, who would that be at this point?
I mean, I feel like we kind of already touched on it. I feel like the easy answer is the Phillies because they are playing much better than their numbers show. They're winning games that honestly they probably shouldn't be, and it's just a matter of time. Can they keep up that? Can they keep that up? Because if you look at their stats, they are not in the top 5 in any category except for defensive efficiency and zone rating. Everything else, actually, for the most part, they're not even in the top 10 in any stat category across the board, pitching or offense. And it's baffling to me how they keep winning games. And maybe they've just got that same Phillies magic that the real life Phillies have right now in the playoffs going to the World Series. But whatever he's doing, it's working because they're defying the numbers right now. And for someone who works in analytics, that's just weird to look at.
Yeah, I think for me, the Phillies seem like the easy answer. At the same time, I don't know that we've seen anything to indicate any of those other teams in that division are, ready to go on, some kind of run.
This is true. Their really only competition are the Nationals.
Yeah. So because of that, I almost lean toward, and this is going to be a little bit more of a outside chance, but I almost wonder if it's the Baltimore Orioles. With the Red Sox having plenty of assets there in their lineup, plenty of capital that they could potentially add to their pitching staff. They're only 4 games behind them right now, and it feels like that Boston team hasn't really shifted itself into high gear yet. And if Billy and his Boston team could start to go on a roll and maybe make a move or two to really bolster that rotation, I think the Orioles still, again, they have Ethan Knight, but they don't have that second ace there in Jim Reed that they had last season. I think that could in the second half allow Boston to chase them down.
That's possibly true, but I would like to point out that the Phillies competition, while we mentioned right now it's really only one team, as there's only 2 teams in the division that are above 500 right now, but that other team that's above 500 are the defending World Series champions.
Very true.
You cannot count them out. We saw it last year. They kind of skated by, kind of flew under the radar, were able to snag the division win, and then just ran through the playoffs. And I think with the talent that they have in Washington, it's only a matter of time before they overtake the Phillies. And right now, neither of them are in a position for a wild card spot. So that's why I think the most likely case. I think it's the Phillies.
Yeah,
but you made a very valid argument for the other East division. It's just like it looks like the Eastern division. It's kind of interesting. It looks like the Eastern divisions are the 2 worst divisions. The 2 West divisions are the 2 best divisions, and then the Central are just in the central of everything.
Yeah, solid divisions there.
Yeah. All right. Well, that will you can see this may be the first time that we had the exact same 10 teams. We just had them in different orders. I think normally we have like 1 or 2 teams that are different at the bottom, but I think this may be the first time we actually had the same 10 teams, unless you're counting our playoff power rankings where we had to have the same 10 teams, but
right.
But yeah, so very interesting. We have the same teams in the top 10. Just had a little bit of a mix up between 3 through 5, and then we flipped 7 and 8. But let us know what you think down in the comments. Who did we leave off that you would have put in the top 10? And would you change any order? I don't think anyone's going to argue about 1 and 2, but you can make a case for the rest of the rankings from 3 to 10. Well, this has definitely been a longer episode than normal with the addition of the interview, but we absolutely love having the interviews. Look forward to more of those coming up in the future. And until next time, this has been Andrew and JR for the eMLB Insider, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care, everyone.